Thank you so much. So excited to be here and already hearing so many echoes of our work in the other talks so far. So I'm going to talk to you today about some work we've been doing at Jigsaw, which is a group within Google, around modeling pro-social conversations and new products to help enable this for different platforms and moderators. So first, what is Jigsaw? If you're not familiar, we're a small group of about 34 people, 30 to 40 people within Google that explores threats to open societies and actually builds and incubates technology to inspire scalable solutions, largely available to other platforms for free and open source. I'm a UX researcher at Jigsaw within the R&D group, where we focus on research at various stages, from foundational to evaluative around those solutions. And we have a few topic areas. I'm only going to be talking about one of them today, but we also do work around violent extremism with various partners, censorship, disinformation, and hate and harassment. But what I'm going to be talking about in particular is related to one product we have called Perspective API, which is a free API that uses machine learning to identify toxic comments and make it easier to host better conversations online, built on Google Cloud Platform. In short, you can give it some text and it'll give you back a score with the probability of how toxic that text is likely to be. And that can be used in a variety of ways. For moderators, that score can give them insight as a human in the loop to what to do with that comment. You can use it to trigger various interventions for people writing comments that might be identified as toxic. Or you can give user controls, signals to do things with that, or just to visualize and understand trends as researchers. So the work I'm going to talk about today is going beyond Perspective's initial offerings around toxicity, as we think about more about elevating high quality and authentic voices and more pro-social attributes of language, and whether these might be used in similar ways. Drawing upon past research that highlighting quality comments might improve conversation's tone. Thank you. All right, hopefully you can hear me better now. And also the idea that highlighting more quality or constructive aspects of language might actually increase learning and understanding within those conversations. We're also excited by opportunities afforded by large language models that might make it easier to build out ways to detect these kinds of traits. And so how we're thinking about it is a shift perhaps from how many in this room have been thinking about LLMs and generative models and actually aligning values within their outputs. We're thinking more about how can you use Gen AI and LLMs to promote human values in conversation amongst people. So what do I mean specifically by qualities? We're currently exploring and researching a variety of qualities, both on the pro-social side, but also trying to think about various persuasion and manipulation attributes and how those kind of play out in conversations. Today I'm going to focus on some of the initial research around those pro-social attributes, in particular constructiveness, curiosity or understanding seeking, and personal stories. And I'll tell you a bit more about those in a bit. But just for your reference, we're about to make these available for experimental use and are already starting to roll these out to trusted tester partners. So if you are interested, feel free to contact me and can tell you some more things about the training and performance and all that good stuff. So why think about pro-social comments at all? How we got here was really looking into this question of how can you design comment spaces not just to reduce toxic and anti-social speech, but to actually reward and elevate pro-social speech as a way to bridge conflict. As a UX researcher, me and the R&D team went about this through a few different methods, starting with just foundational understanding of across comment spaces. What do people value? What are their needs? And so we did a series of interviews and survey around that. and most recently a study comparing some of these newest attributes for the Perspective API and how people perceive comments differently based on those rankings. So first with those foundational needs, we saw that from our interviews, we kind of came up with a few needs that people mentioned as important to them in comment spaces, both as readers and writers of comments. We tried to understand how that generalized through a US only, but 2,000 plus person survey that was representative of the US population. And we saw that some of the needs that bubbled to the top as both most important and least satisfied, so you can think of these as like their unmet needs, related largely to credibility of the comments that they were reading, and there's this fear of social sanctioning. So that was in language like, it's important to trust the information you find is reliable, or correct false and misleading information, or on the social sanctioning side, to express yourself without fear of negative consequences or hostile reactions. And there's a whole bunch of other needs you can see here, but these were some that we focused on. And what they valued specifically within comments really kind of seemed to exist along these poles of positive, by which people, when they elaborated in open responses, looked something like compassion and understanding within the comments they were reading, and really being driven away from communities where they found people were kind of hostile and othering. So this I think is a good idea of the normative preferences, as we were talking about earlier, how people want comments to be, even if they're not behaving that way in the moment. And indeed, imbalance of these qualities were what people reported actually had led them to disengage from conversations across platforms in the past. So okay, people say this is what they want. That all sounds good. Compassion's a great thing, understanding's a great thing. Yet we've seen elsewhere that outrage and division can also drive engagement. So how do readers actually react if you try to redesign and reorganize comment sections around some of these prosocial qualities in the context of real comment sections? So that's what this third study was looking at, where we actually took, for 2 New York Times article comment sections, we compared the current reverse chronological comments that were there with other conditions that were ranked by those constructive attributes, personal stories, and understanding seeking. And then we aimed to see how that affected readers' perceptions of how credible that comment section was, how polarizing did it feel, and also their likelihood of engagement. And we looked at that for 2 topics there. And just to give you a better idea of what these attributes were, this is how those attributes were defined for the models we were using. So this is like what people rated that helped us get to those scores. So personal experience or story as support for a statement, constructive being specific or well-reasoned points, and understanding seeking or curiosity being attempts to clarify or ask follow-up questions. So that might be a question, but that might also just be a general kind of tone or vibe of curiosity. So this is what our stimuli looked like. They were Figma prototypes that participants in the survey could actually access to kind of scroll as if they were real comments. We took out any mention of the New York Times and anonymized the usernames and actual engagement data. So everything was the same across the conditions except those comment rankings. And it was a between subjects design, so in each condition you were either only seeing control or only constructive or personal stories, et cetera. And again, what we were trying to understand was, depending on the condition, would that change how some of these outcomes, like polarization, how respectful you felt like that comment section would be towards new commenters or hostile, how trustworthy the comments were, how informative they were, and also just some of these, again, self-report, but you could start to get a sense of did people feel like they would be likely to return? And it was a think aloud prototype, so we also got a sense of how people navigated it in real time, where we encouraged them to say, I would reply here, I would scroll further here, et cetera. So this is pre-publication, so I'm just sharing some of the very initial takeaways right now. So you're getting the first look at this ever. But a few things we saw. First, really encouraging, and I know this is not a ton of detail here, but overall, we did see that these other conditions largely performed better than the status quo with reverse chronological across these outcomes. So all arms trended, on average, less hostile, more informative, respectful, trustworthy, and interesting. Not always with statistical significance, but a few of the outcomes, like hostility, were quite significant, where very hostile, for example, was reduced by 14 to 20% in all of those conditions. But other things to think about, rankings could as well change how kind of biased or favorable it seemed like that comment section was to, in this case, Democrats versus Republicans. So all conditions actually significantly improved the favorability towards Democrats compared to control, but understanding seeking was the only one that improved favorability to Republicans as well, and that was a significant change. None, however, did worsen perceptions of how that comment section was towards Democrats or Republicans. So more to study there, but even just noticing that these changes are sensitive to that is important. 3 and 4, I might just do these together because context showed that it did matter in all of these various ways. Reminder that we were looking at both politics op-ed comment section and 100 best restaurants dining section. So the ranking survey responses did look slightly different across the conditions because that content looked very different. So starting with personal stories, in the context of politics, and maybe you can sort of imagine this, there was more of a sense that as people were sharing stories of, being at the dinner table with their conservative cousin, sharing conspiracy theories, people perceived these stories as more biased, more emotional, and overall that condition compared to the others looked a lot more similar to the control, which people also found quite hostile and biased. However, in the context of dining, people love personal stories, saying, oh, I found this great hidden gem, or even if it was negative, like, oh, I went to this restaurant and the service has really gone down the hill. So context does matter. Similarly, for this curiosity or understanding seeking attribute, that looked really different in the context of a politics op-ed, where people in the open responses and in the survey responses you could see, did largely appreciate and find it more respectful when people were asking questions like, how are people defining Republican versus Democrats in this sense? What do you mean by that? That was largely seen as positive. Whereas in questions, in dining, it was just kind of not really giving you more information about a restaurant. If people were like, is this restaurant still open? What are its hours again? And so that was rated as least interesting and least likely for return visits, specifically for dining. Finally, we saw there was a lot of sensitivity towards the length and type of language elevated by these classifiers. So a common kind of complaint was, I don't care enough to read all of that. These new classifiers did seem to privilege lengthier, kind of higher verbosity than the control, which users largely responded negatively to, even if at the same time they did find them valuable on some level if they were interested in that topic. So just to give you a quick peek of what this looked like in that think aloud exercise as they were going through the comments. Across conditions for a politics op-ed, before people even opened the comment section, people would be saying things like, ooh, just the headline of this politics op-ed is making me nervous. This is a charged issue. I know it's going to be bad. And across conditions, Times commenters are pretty long as a rule, even if you're not using some of these classifiers. So even in the control, people responding to how long they were and how they might just want to scroll by. But then just to give you a sense of by condition, so control, a lot of people feeling like they would just get caught up in the drama of these comments, all honestly very negative and biased. compared to Constructive, where you started to see, surprisingly thoughtful. I didn't see any comments I thought were very bad, which is almost the opposite of the one before. But at the same time, it's a little exhausting to read it all. Personal stories, there's a lot of emotion here. It feels more like a personal anecdote, and I want info on the actual issue, not yourself. And then understanding seeking, a sense that this person feels like they could actually slide in and get along with these people, and actually being surprised at the quality that it was less inflammatory than it existed, or than they expected. Whereas in contrast for dining, and I'll just go through these quickly, you can see that the goals are sort of different here, right? So for control, it was, again, a mix of positive and negative, and people thinking in different terms of like, oh, it would actually be helpful to maybe filter by this. Constructive, appreciating the thought out information, but being turned off by longer ones. Personal stories, liking that they were getting these true experiences. And finally, understanding seeking, as I mentioned, feeling like people were just asking rhetorical questions that weren't giving them much information. Across conditions, we also coded from the open responses what qualities made people find certain comments more or less valuable. And we were encouraged to see that this largely did mirror how some of the outcomes we were thinking about. So you can see these buckets that ended up sort of mirroring each other. People ranking higher comments that were more informative, had an accessible writing style, had a tone of understanding or civility, and were personally engaging. And then the mirror image of that, of feeling like things were too kind of biased, inaccessible, rude, or unengaging. So yeah, as I mentioned, that did largely line up with our outcomes, but it did, with the exception of accessibility of language. So that we see as a big opportunity to think about in ranking. That is another thing, probably related to engagement as well. So in conclusion, I think one big takeaway I've had is that all of these have their different quirks in different contexts. There's not going to be one attribute of quality like constructiveness or personal stories that you should always, all the time, rank up top. It's really going to depend. But at the same time, seeing how these can move some of these like societal and social outcomes we care about, to me means that these can still be powerful levers or tools in a toolkit to help platforms and users align on their own definitions of quality and help them to more explicitly design, measure, and adapt for those qualities within their own contexts. So our next steps, we're really looking to the research community and civil society and other platform partners to help us learn here. So we continue to develop these classifiers, including some qualitative work with raters that we're excited about with the group SIFT to improve inter-rater reliability. These being quite tricky concepts to reliably define, as well as red teaming and bias evaluation. We're also looking to think about how you might fine-tune some of these attributes within communities through AI steerable moderation with specific groups. And more studies kind of like this with different populations. This was all US-focused English and within one particular commenting context, so you would expect that to look very different in different contexts. We're actually looking to do more on-platform tests. So partners at Civic Health Project, for example, have an exciting study using some of these classifiers where we'll be able to see on-platform effects with a Chrome extension. I would love to invite anyone in this room, if you're interested in testing these or think of other use cases, we're looking for more people to try these out. Thank you, and again, here's my contact information if you're interested in that.